Okay guys, in today's video we're going to be breaking down how attractive is Androgenic. He's someone who's blown up a lot lately, averaging around 500k views on recent TikToks, and this will be a continuation from previous Looksfluencers I have rated before. And just a quick announcement before we start, some huge things are coming to this channel starting from today. Most importantly, I'll be getting back into regular PowerPoint videos, just like the old days. So get subscribed if you aren't already and stay tuned to this channel to see some of the best data-driven videos on Hype Pill, the BP, and looks in general coming to the channel, just like how it used to be. But anyways, let's get into it. So as usual, we're going to be starting with his best features, then going into his flaws. So Androgenic's first best feature is a long ramus. So the ramus, which is the bone down the side of the face here, it's ideal if it's long. It's more masculine, it's more attractive, it gives off a high testosterone look, so it's definitely one of his best features. His next best feature is good forward growth. So going to the side profile, we can see that his mandible projects forward quite a lot. Again, it's a masculine feature. You don't want your jawline to be recessed because that indicates poor facial development. So it's another good feature for him. His next good feature is a broad chin. As we can see, his chin is broad from the frontal angle, very similar to the ideal, so another high testosterone attractive feature for him. And his next two best features are in a combination. So he's got good eyebrow thickness, which is where the density, the fiber count, the colouring is good. And I'm pretty sure he does dye his eyebrows, but it doesn't really make a difference, because as long as they look natural, he's able to pull it off. And also his shape is pretty good. So the ideal shape for your eyebrows is when you've got this flattened curve shape. And it seems that he has this. Maybe his eyebrows are ever so slightly negative tilted, which isn't great, but maybe it's just the angle. But as a whole, his eyebrows are definitely a strong point because of both the shape and the density. Next, another good feature he has is good facial definition. So this is where your jawline, your cheekbones, your face in general is lean. You can see the amount of definition he has is very similar to the ideals over here, so it's another positive feature. And that's mainly going to happen if you're a low body fat percentage, and he definitely is. From this image, he looks to be around the 11% body fat range. It's always hard to tell when they've got a pump and proper gym lighting, but just from what I can see visually, it looks to be around the 10 to 12%, which is ideal. And like I said, that also appears in his face. Having a lower body fat percentage gives you a leaner face, which is more attractive. His next positive feature is a thick neck, so we can see just by going for a couple of these photos, and it looks like he's put in some effort because the neck is a muscle just like anything else. If you train your neck, it will grow in size, and it's important to have a thick neck because it just frames your face better. Like if you've ever seen images of somebody with a thin neck where they've edited the thin to thick version side by side, you can really see how much of a difference it makes to facial framing, so it's great that he's worked on his neck thickness, and it definitely makes him more attractive. And finally, the last positive feature he has is dovetailing cheekbones. A very rare feature, and a feature that can be very, very attractive. It seems Androgenic does have this to some degree, however, it's always hard to tell, to be honest, especially with these Looksmaxxers when they're using perfect lighting, potentially sucking in their cheeks. And I think in the case of Androgenic, I'm pretty sure he wears makeup as well, so it's hard to tell if he does have this for real or if it's just a lot of frauding, such as the techniques I mentioned. But just from what we can visually see, it seems he does have this feature to some degree, so another positive for him. So that's it for all of his positives, a decent number, and now we're going to be getting into his flaws, for which he has slightly more of. So his first flaw is facial asymmetry, and when it comes to Androgenic, this is especially noticeable in the lower half of his face, because if we were to imagine to draw a line straight down the middle, it goes straight, and then cranks right at the bottom. So I think the upper half of his face is pretty symmetrical, but it's mainly this lower half where it kind of deviates to the side. This is actually the most common form of facial asymmetry because the lower third of the face is where there's more joints, there's more moving parts, and when there's more moving parts, there's more things that can go wrong. And maybe he has a tiny bit of asymmetry with regard to his eyes too, but the main asymmetry I see is with regard to his lower third. So in my opinion, this is his biggest flaw because these flaws are listed in order pretty much. And now as for his next flaw, it is that he has a large face to neurocranium ratio. And as a matter of fact, for these next 4 flaws, you're going to see a common theme coming in. And that is because a lot of these different flaws are related to looking like a bit of an ogre, having an ogreish appearance. And all 4 of these next flaws basically show that. And I'm going to explain why. So this first one is having a large neurocranium in relation to the size of your face. And when it comes to androgenic, we can see that his face is pretty big. It takes up quite a big area, but his head is quite small. The ideal is when you have a 1-to-1 ratio, but for him, even without drawing the lines on, you can see that his face is noticeably a bit bigger compared to his head. It's more similar to this ogreish example. And even if we compare to this side profile here, where he's standing next to Austin Wayne, another looksfluencer, who I think is more attractive than androgenic, you can see that he has the ideal ratio where it's roughly 1-to-1, just looking at it visually. But for androgenic, his face is very large compared to the size of the back of his head, which is giving this ogreish appearance. So in my opinion, this is his second biggest flaw, and it also relates to the next flaw he has, which is an overly prominent brow ridge. And this one's even easier to see, so if we just look at the two examples here, the ideal is when your brow ridge is there, it's noticeable, it's not flat like the betafied version down at the bottom here. So there's clearly a ridge, and there's got some degree of sharpness to it, but it's just way too much. It's ogreified when it sticks out and you can see it's extremely visible. And for androgenic, it's very obvious. You can see that his brow ridge is too prominent. It's more like this version rather than the ideal. So another ogreified feature. And the next flaw is similar again. This flaw he has is his forehead is overly regressed. So it's best when your forehead has a slight backward slant to it. As we can see, this is the most attractive version, and the forehead is slightly backwards leaning. It's more attractive than the betafied one, where it's pretty much a straight line upwards. In fact, this is more like a woman's forehead. However, it's also bad when your forehead is extremely far backwards, really sloped, really regressed. And when it comes to androgenic, we can see his is pretty similar to this. It's maybe not quite this bad, but it's definitely not as good as the ideal. His forehead is too backwards leaning. So now for his last flaw, which is the ogreified version again, androgenic has an overly projected chin. He has too much chin projection, and it's especially noticeable in this photo here. In fact, if we bring side by side of androgenic and Austin Wayne again, you can see Austin Wayne has a moderate amount of chin projection, close to the ideal, but androgenic's is way forward reaching, really far forward. His is more similar to the ogreified version. So anyways, as I said, all these last few flaws highlight he's ogre-maxed. And that's why it's no surprise, even in his comments, the biggest accusations are him looking like a true ogre. 40,000 likes. And even in this edit of him, you can see most of the exaggerated features are resembling what I mentioned. The overly forward chin projection, the brow ridge, the regressed forehead, the face to neurocranium ratio. All of these variables are exaggerated and are based on real flaws he has, and collectively they are making him look ogre-maxed. Now, I don't want to be too hard on him because even though these are his biggest flaws, in general it is still better to be the ogreified version than the betafied version. And that's mainly because we live in a low testosterone era. There's plenty of guys with zero masculinity, zero testosterone. There's just a massive shortage of guys with high primal, high testosterone features now. But that doesn't mean you should go too far, and as for androgenic, he has gone too far. And maybe that's because he's been bone smashing, because not only does his chin look too forward grown, his cheekbones look overly forward grown in this photo too. And especially when you compare to his old pics, you don't see this. So maybe bone smashing caused all this and made him go too far. I mean, it's rare for someone to have these flaws, which is why he may not have realised he was going too far. In fact, one of the only people that comes to mind with similar flaws is Nikolai Valuev. Maybe this could have been a warning sign. If androgenic carried on with the mogging cuckoo train, this is where he'd end up. More extreme and less attractive than if he dialed it down a bit. And I'll iterate, he even made his own video about being extreme, being unnatural. But this is costing him. And this is even proven scientifically. Does anyone remember those studies that showed the most attractive face is literally the average ones? Where they morphed thousands of faces together and found everyone's flaws cancelled each other's out, so average proportions actually turned out best. Which is basically similar to what we have in the middle picture here. The other two are too extreme. And as for androgenic, he is far from having average proportions. He's more on the extreme side, the hypermasculine extreme to be precise. Anyway, now getting into some of his other flaws. His next flaw is Norwooding. And I think androgenic is a Norwood 3 on the Norwood balding scale. However, I've also known recently he's had a hair transplant. These two photos might be recently after he's had his hair transplant actually. So well done for getting it done. It's definitely a viable solution for regressing the damage that Norwooding had caused in the past. But obviously getting the hair transplant isn't end of story, as I'm sure he is aware. Just a quick couple bits of Looksmaxxing advice. It's important to maintain your results after getting the hair transplant, and one of the ways you do that is by using finasteride. As I said, he probably already knows this stuff, but just for anyone who isn't aware, finasteride will prevent balding on the hormonal level. So if you're currently shedding hairs, and it especially happens after getting a hair transplant because the hairs can very quickly shed if you don't address the hormones that causes the fibers to fall out to begin with. So it's very important to get on finasteride. And one other thing that you might want to consider is getting on minoxidil, which is applied directly to the scalp and can help you stimulate growth, but I found usually isn't as effective as finasteride. He's already gotten a hair transplant, so we don't need to go from that, but here's a couple of examples of the results that you can expect to get if you go through with this procedure. But now getting into some more of his flaws. So another one of his flaws is acne scarring, and it's hard to see in most of his pictures actually, again because he's wearing the makeup, but here you can see what I'm talking about. This doesn't look like spots that he still has. Maybe he got on Accutane a long time ago. However, sometimes you see scarring still present. So it's another flaw he has, but to be honest, in most of the images, it's not that visible. Another big flaw, I think, is that he has unnatural colouring. And what I mean by this, especially it's noticeable in this flaw, he just looks a bit uncanny, and it's not because of the structural flaws, but just his skin in general. Like in a lot of the images, he doesn't look to have good colouring, and even if you compare him to Austin Wayne, who I believe has better colouring, it's just a better hue, more natural, more attractive, and has broader appeal. Whereas when you compare to Androgenic, I don't know what it is, he just looks a bit different. It doesn't look like the natural, everyday college Chad, the hue that the college Chad will have. Androgenics looks more like the I had to fake it till I made it way of Looksmaxxing. And generally, if you have to fraud your way to look more attractive in any means, it's never as good as being the naturally born version who just got handed this stuff from being born with the good genetics. So the unnatural colouring is another flaw I think he has, which is often pretty overlooked in the BP space. Now, as for his next flaw, I wasn't sure 100% to include this because in some images it looks not present, in others it looks like it does, especially when we compare these side by side of him to Austin Wayne. And that flaw is loose hyoid skin. But anyways, I thought I'd include this, especially since this screenshot was taken from a video Austin Wayne uploaded, which probably shows Androgenic in a more natural version of himself, where more of the flaws are present, because as a lot of these Looksmaxxing influencers like to do, when they're uploading their own videos, they want to make sure that everything is perfect. Perfect lighting, perfect pump, perfect facial tension, perfect makeup even. And obviously when he has these things going on, you can't see this flaw as much, but when he's not allowed to hide behind the frauding mechanisms, you can see that the loose hyoid skin is more present. Next, another flaw he has is I believe his gonial angle is too acute, and this might have actually been another flaw that could have made it to the ogreified versions of him. Because if we look at his gonial angle, it just looks too box-shaped for my liking. It's too square. Whereas if you compare to Austin Wayne's, whose is a little bit more obtuse, it looks more similar to the ideal of 115 degrees. His next flaw is, I believe his philtrum is a little bit too narrow. So if we compare Androgenic's philtrum to the two examples over here, his definitely looks more like this, which is more like a woman's philtrum. This isn't a woman, by the way, but you can see how there's definitely more androgynous features. It's generally a more masculine feature to have a broader philtrum, but this is pretty low on the list, so not a major flaw. His next flaw is a large eye to eyebrow length. You can see that there's slightly too much spacing between his eyes and his eyebrows. Not as good as the ideal where your eyebrows are low set and sitting pretty much on top of your eyes. But again, this isn't a really big flaw, it's low down the list. And finally, I think that he might have a possible underbite. But again, it's not visible in every photos, but I wanted to include it just because it seems he might from the front angle. But I wasn't 100% sure, which is why it's the last thing on the list. So anyways, now getting to his final rating, when we combine all of the best features that he has and the flaws, balancing all of them out, my final rating that I gave Androgenic was 5 out of 10, average looking. And now I mainly gave him this rating because I think he's brought down by a lot of the ogre stuff. However, it's also worth mentioning he's 6'5" and jacked. So his overall might be a 6 or even 7 out of 10. But in my opinion, he's a little bit too jacked and scary looking to have broad appeal, especially from the UG types I mentioned in previous videos. In fact, I'm very certain his range will be capped for exclusively getting DGs. But that's a topic I spoke more about in previous videos. But anyways, 5 out of 10 is a solid rating, even though it might be a little lower than what he was anticipating. I didn't want this video to be a hit piece, I want it to be objective, so if Andro is watching this, I don't want him to get mad or think I'm bashing him, because I'm truly trying to be objective. And now, getting to what his rating means. His 5 out of 10 puts him in the top 60 to 25% of men percentile range, and this only applies facially, so 25% scored higher than him, 35% scored the same, 40% lower. And this is all compiled from my own data of 1000 face ratings. But again, I iterate, if he wasn't so uncanny looking, then he would have scored higher. And given his height and physique, he probably scores higher overall anyways. Besides that, that's all for the video, but I do have 2 big announcements to make. 1, I have a new IG dedicated to the channel, so go over there and follow that right away. There'll be plenty of behind the scenes and other stuff getting posted there. And 2, I am now selling personal face rating PowerPoints. So if you like what you saw in this video and want to get the exact same, then this will now be available as the first link in the description. This has been something I've been asked to provide for years, instead of the usual face rating reports, because I know you guys love the PowerPoints the most, so it's now finally available. It includes the full detail PowerPoint, in depth with 30 slides on strengths, weaknesses, Looksmaxxing, and your final rating, and overall score and potential. As a matter of fact, this product has already been getting sold the last 2 weeks to private buyers, and I already have a bunch of great reviews. So I know this is going to be very popular. Lastly, for the foreseeable future, this new service is going to be sold on Fiverr, just like I used to. I'm not going to explain why I'm selling on here because it's long, so don't ask, and none of you will guess the real reason anyway. Actually, you're free to speculate in the comments the reason, but I guarantee not even one person will guess right. Because, truth be told, some of the speculations I've seen from you guys about things in the past have been just way off. And I know already, not even one person will guess right. In fact, if someone guesses right, I will pin the comment. I will pin your comment personally over my own advertisement if there is one. Because I already know not even one person will guess why. Anyway, that's all. Go to the description if you're interested. And like I said at the start, plenty of new PowerPoints are coming just like the old days. So stay subscribed and I'll see you guys in the next one.